it all depends on the infrastructure and how willing the people are to make accommodations for not just people with disabilities, all elderly in general.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of BuddyTalks, a podcast series hosted by Buddy Mobility Care, where we discuss all things accessibility. To tell you a little more, we at Buddy Mobility Care aim to serve senior citizens and people with disabilities by providing wheelchair-friendly transportation and caregiving services in Delhi, Chandigarh, and Bengaluru. On behalf of the Buddy team, I am Radhika, your host for this series, and I hope you have a lot of fun on this journey with us. So, for our first episode, we have with us Mr. Hridayraj Parab, who is a counseling psychologist from Bengaluru, Karnataka. Right? Thank you, Hridayraj, for joining us today. And it'll be great if you could tell our viewers a little more about yourself.
Okay, thanks for having me here today. So, I'm Hridayraj Parab. I am a counseling psychologist and also a certified career coach. I've been living in Bangalore since 2017. So, I did my bachelor's and my master's in psychology here itself. There are a lot of places in Bangalore that, because they're a bit newer than the places I used to go to in Mumbai, there are a lot many more places that I can actually access. So, most of my time is either spent with work, reading novels, playing video games, or it would be going to a theater or a new restaurant. So that's basically the kind of things that I do, apart from doing the online counseling, which I'm doing right now. Apart from that, there's not really much going on, and just happy to be here.
That's great. That's great. And we're really happy to have you here as well. So, just to, talk a little about your journey and your experiences, can you share a little? I mean, you use a wheelchair too, right? Right? Can you just share a little bit about your experiences with muscular dystrophy?
Okay.
And did it, have a significant impact on your choices, on your career choices? And did it shape your role? And did it shape your choices as a career counselor?
Till a certain age, actually, I was not requiring to use a wheelchair. I was actually able to walk, but with great difficulty and would need someone's support. At the age of around 14 is when I started requiring to use a wheelchair because, in the sense, I wasn't able to actually carry my weight because the strength of the muscles, which gradually reduces in my disease, was slowly reducing. And so I didn't have the strength enough to take the weight of my body to stand up. And so I needed a wheelchair. And now it's been around 11 years now that I'm using wheelchair. And to me now, it's like I don't even remember how it was before I used the wheelchair. I've gotten so used to it. So it actually helped me, especially when I was in my 11th and 12th grade, to actually still try to continue being as active as the rest of my classmates. And the fact that I was a wheelchair actually made it easier to, even attend college here. Because if I was in the same situation before using the wheelchair now, then the amount of distance I could go would be really reduced. Like I could only manage to move around in the house. And so because of the wheelchair, I could actually properly attend college, go to college every day. And that kind of helped me have a confidence about myself. And yeah, so initially, in the first few years that I was on the wheelchair, it was a bit difficult for me to kind of emotionally speaking or to generally accept how different I am. But then over the years, as I grew older and the experiences I had, I started feeling even more confident. Actually, what helped was actually going to college for a long time because then I'd meet a lot of new people. I also met some other people who had disabilities as well. And I learned that just like other people who may not have certain challenges, even I could have a normal life as much as possible. In terms of the career choice, since I was already on the wheelchair, so in 11th, 12th, when I was studying psychology, I feel that maybe even if I wasn't on the wheelchair, And maybe even if I didn't have a disability, I'd still have the same kind of interest in the subjects that I have. And so I would have still gone with psychology, but maybe I may have gone to a different path than just counseling psychology, maybe something like HR, or there's part of psychology called clinical psychology that's more to do with actual people who have actual mental health disorders. So I could connect it though, because I feel that because of the disability, I could see things from a different perspective, and also saw how people who had other kinds of disabilities, the experiences they had. And based on that, I felt like if I could be someone who, for people who are finding it difficult to adjust, whether it's someone with a disability or not, there are a lot of issues that can come up, not because of it being anyone's fault, but just because of how society works. And so, having someone to kind of talk about all of it, find good ways to actually, cope up with all the challenges is something I felt not just something that I need, but a lot of other people will need. And so that kind of did build up my interest in helping professions.
That's great to know. Moving on to the next set of questions that I
Mm-hmm.
have, I want to talk to you a little bit about disability inclusion, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
in your experiences, while
Mhm.
talking to people, counseling people, and just
Mhm.
generally in your experiences and going out and about in the world,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of the most significant barriers in disability inclusion that the Indian society currently has? Whether it's in terms of infrastructure availability or perceptions,
Mhm.
what do you
Mhm.
think we can do?
So, in terms of the barriers that I've seen, there have been a lot of changes across the last, I would say, around 15 years. A lot of things have been continuously changing, but some barriers still exist, like the infrastructure. Like, for instance, in newer, maybe colleges, educational institutions, or even office complexes, the more newer ones, they are made more accessible, like with proper ramps, and lifts are also available. Like, that's how I've seen some of the newer places. But still, there are a lot of places, whether it's, uh, I wouldn't say really public places like governmental offices, because I've seen a lot of them have actually built accessible facilities. But when it comes to private properties, like certain food joints, cafes, or, certain even medical stores, or I've seen places like optician or a dentist, kind of places which are not accessible, and they haven't added ramps at all, even in medical facilities which are not hospitals. That is actually a big barrier, because it's like even certain medical facilities are difficult to access. That's what I've seen. In terms of malls or governmental institutions or public places, there is a lot of infrastructure being added, and in certain educational institutions and offices as well. But there are still a lot of private places, especially, which it's just difficult to go to for someone. Like, even if it's someone who is elderly, some of the places seem so difficult that even for them it would be uncomfortable, and for people with especially disabilities related to movement or locomotor disabilities, it would just not possible to go to. So that is the biggest barrier I have felt. And in terms of perception, in my experience, I haven't really faced anyone who's treated me a bit differently than how they treat their other friends. Or, like, even when I was working as a counselor at Delhi Public School, Bangalore North, even there, I wasn't really treated any differently from how they were treating other employees, at least in terms of my department, where there were counselors and special educators. But I have heard from other people with similar disability, some of their experiences, like in school, how maybe some other peers may have treated them, or maybe some bad experience with a teacher. So it I don't really think there's a negative perception as much about this disability, especially if it's a physical one or it's something that you can easily observe. It's not a negative, there's no negative idea about them. It's just that people feel that there are a lot of things they won't be able to do. And even though there are a lot of assistive technologies now that do help us, but they feel that, they don't know because of less awareness of how they can actually make it such that people with disabilities can be the same as the rest of the people. It's basically that which is the problem, and they just don't know how they should respond, basically, or the kind of things they should be doing. And frankly, some of them may not even want to think about it. Like, there might be some people who actually don't care about whether it's people with disabilities or anyone in particular. There are some people, could be cases where there's just a laid back attitude where they don't want to put in much effort for anyone in particular. They would just maybe build a place or try just to have the legal acceptance, maybe that a place is accessible. They might do something just to show that it is, but then when someone actually comes there who has a disability, it becomes a problem. Like, for example, with my brother, when we moved here, he was still in school. I had finished my 12th, but my brother was still in school. So when we were finding a new school here, there were a few schools who did claim that they were accessible, but then when my parents did go there, that wasn't the case. Like, for instance, with me, I just have muscular dystrophy, but my brother, he also has muscular dystrophy, but at the same time, he also has learning disability. And so, certain accommodations like someone to read out questions in the exam or write like while he dictates so write the answers in exams, and few more accommodations. But certain schools were not. They said they would help, but on the internet there was information, but it wasn't actually the case. It was around more than at least 20 schools my parents had to see, out of which the DPS at Bangalore North was the accessible one, because it was doing its best to implement inclusion. It all depends on the infrastructure and how willing the people are to make accommodations for not just people with disabilities, all elderly in general, is what I seem to be the barriers. What I feel.
Right. So essentially, if I sum it up, then one significant barrier is essentially
Mhm.
the infrastructure, how willing people are to accommodate people with disabilities, and rather they basically see it as a lip service or a formality that they have to legally comply with rather than a real
Yes.
issue, right? As a follow up
Yes.
to that, what do you think,
Mhm.
if there was one thing that you would basically suggest where workplaces and educational institutes to incorporate, right, to create a
Mhm.
more inclusive environment for everybody,
Mhm.
what would it be?
Mhm.
Does it lean more towards accessible infrastructure or sensitization and awareness?
It would be accessible infrastructure, because although there are companies now where you can do work from home as well, but still there are a lot of professions or areas of occupation where you actually need to physically go there. And unless it's a place where you can actually access and easily maybe maneuver your wheelchair around, or just have enough space to maybe not have steps, having a ramp to access it, or having a separate restroom, so that they have more privacy and they can take their own time, and they don't have to hurry up for anyone. So those kind of things would be necessary first. Only then we can actually think about sensitization. So accessible infrastructure, I feel, is what's the need of the hour.
Okay, all right. So in your opinion, is there a significant role that representation of people with disabilities in
Mhm.
media Does that play a significant role in how, the people perceive persons with disabilities, or, how does it play a major role in fostering inclusion?
In terms of on media, if it comes to leadership roles, I've seen a lot of people who would make remarks about what they saw, especially if someone who has a disability is in a leadership position, is that they might either talk about things like certain percentages or quota of population, maybe that maybe like a certain percentage of people with disabilities have to be given a office or a post, or have to be selected, or have to be given representation. They might talk about that and say that it was because of that they reached that place. Or they may feel that, or some people may feel that, they're just like rest of us, and so they would have managed to get there. So there are actually two different type of views that I've seen. In terms of people I know personally, I have seen them react in more like the fact that they face that the person may have gone through a lot of challenges, and because of their perseverance and maybe people close to them, that they were able to reach that position. But maybe that's only either something they've said in front of me, or it's maybe because of having been with me and seeing how things are for me, they felt that something must have been similar for that person. So for leadership roles, if you see someone in a leadership position in media, that's what I would say. But when it comes to just showing someone with a disability in regular lives, or like in a TV serials, where they're showing basically daily, day to day, maybe how their day is, how they are with their friends, the kind of things they do at home, whether they go to again school or work or not. So again, in that case, it does help build awareness that there can be a person with a disability, because there are a lot of people who may not know that there can be such a thing as a disability. And at the same time, those who do know that there are people who can have certain disabilities, through the media, they'll be better able to understand, or they'll be more aware about how it is for them in terms of increasing awareness. And I can see that media does help that way.
Right, that's great.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about, some of the perceptions, stigmas, and perception stigmas associated with, disabilities in general, and how does it impact the emotional well-being of people who are disabled, and their caregivers, right? So in your journey as a mental health practitioner, what are some of the most common misconceptions or stereotypes, about people with disabilities that you have frequently encountered?
Before the mental health part, in my own personal experience, what I've seen is that there is less stigma, negative perception about someone if they have a physical disability, because people will be like, okay, their hands or their legs strong enough, or something they're not strong enough, and so maybe they're not able to move, and so they need a wheelchair. But if it's, or even if it's someone who has a visual impairment, or even they can't hear, even that, or if they have to use sign language, that people seem to be okay with, comfort fine with. But at the same time, when there are people who have things like, maybe someone has autism on the spectrum, or they might have ADHD, or even a learning disability, then there's a difference even among how peers would act. Because for someone with a physical disability, peers less often would say anything or make remarks about them. But when it comes to these kind of other disabilities, which may not be due to purely physical aspect, but maybe more to do with your brain and certain other DNA aspects, the students just make fun of it and have a negative perception about it. And even teachers, I have personally seen this happening with someone who had a learning disability in my school, where it was like a Hindi period, and the teacher was asking them to read, but then they couldn't read, and so the teacher themselves were ridiculing them. So this is something that I saw when I was personally going to school. But now when I started actually right after masters, when I started my internship Delhi Public School, Bangalore North, the counseling department, there I saw, because they were trying to be inclusive and making the students more sensitive towards the needs, whether it's someone with a physical disability or any unobservable or kind of intellect, mental or other kind of disability. And so the negative perception I've only seen in these terms. But apart from that, what I've come across with clients I've seen who have disabilities is that either the parents or family feel so negative or taboo about a disability that sometimes they just won't accept that the child has a disability, especially in cases where it's a learning disability or something like ADHD. Parents just aren't ready to accept that it's something that the child can have.
Right.
So that way, it's basically a stigma from their own family sometimes. Then there have been cases like I knew someone who had a visual impairment, like a client, and they themselves were not okay with some of the accommodations they needed. Like, for instance, they wanted to go on the school trip, but they would require the mother to join. And the student just wasn't ready with that. And he was always asking me, how would you feel about it? And how is that okay? And I kind of did help him try to understand that how accommodations are needed, no matter just for the actually going other people to accept that you can go there, maybe. So again, sometimes even the person themselves may not like being seen as someone who has a disability. So these are the kind of things that I've seen in my experience.
Right. So my key takeaways from whatever you just
Mhm,
said was that
mhm,
physical or locomotor disabilities are met with more compassion because they're observable, they're
mhm,
more tangible,
mhm.
right? Whether
Yes.
intellectual
Mhm,
disabilities and mental,
mhm,
emotional distress, right?
mhm. Yes.
Those conditions
Mhm.
are not met with very sympathetically, or for the lack of a better word, with a lot, with more understanding,
Yes.
right? And sometimes that leads, and basically that lack of compassion here, that
Mhm.
translates
Yes.
into the person who has a disability. I mean, they are denying themselves they are denying themselves the accommodations that they necessarily require. Am
Yes, because of the lack of compassion from others. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, on a more
Mm.
personal level, right, what is the one advice you would give someone with a disability who is struggling with feelings of isolation or distress, or, the lack of self acceptance?
I think now a lot of people have access to mobile phones or social media. The one thing is being connected with other people who also have disabilities, whether it's a similar one or the same kind of thing that you're facing, or even if it's a different kind of disability. Like I myself in a group with other people who have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and in the like they're in college or they are working, that around 18 to 35, that age group. Some of us that we are connected on a WhatsApp group, we share each other's achievements with each other. Whatever we're doing currently, we share. We're connected on like Instagram, Facebook, all of that. And we keep supporting each other. And one of our group is actually, I think, the first person with DMD to complete MBBS and also to become a psychiatrist. So he's a child psychiatrist, Dr. Sarthak Kamath. So that way, we also kind of are able to, and since I'm also in the mental health field, we, we sometimes decide to, have co- like a group meeting, or like how people going through the similar thing usually come to a group, and that kind of and talk it out, and see how we can support each other. We try to do that, come together and talk. So that way, that is one of the biggest things you can do. Always be connected with other people who are going through the same thing, so that you always have someone who understand what you're going through. And also, in the case of some people, they'll have a sibling. For me, I also have my sibling with the same disability, and so that way at home I'm able to kind of manage the to not feel lonely.
Right, that's great. Now that we're towards the end of our episode, what's next for you in your journey? And, how do you think our listeners can follow or support your work?
Basically, last year around October, for 2 years, I was working at Delhi Public School, Bangalore North. But then after that, I felt like I need to focus on something else. So I thought of my PhD. So first, so in terms of that, on Jan 10th, I had my entrance exam for that. It's called National Eligibility Test. Uh, Today was actually the last exam for maybe another subject, so soon the results would be out. But till I get the results, and mostly till next year, I'll only be doing my PhD next year. Now, I recently, like 2 weeks back, started my freelance online counseling and career coaching service. I have been working on that, and recently I was also getting my website designed. So today I actually got it published, but I'm still connecting like payment portals and those kind of things to it. How people, so that's what I'm basically doing. And in terms of personal, since I'm at home, I can also focus a bit on having some time for reading, which for a long time, due to work and before that, due to college, I couldn't really do. So I do have some amount of leisure time as well now, which actually allows me to relax, which I couldn't do earlier. So personally, that's going on, and I'm getting more time with my brother and my mother because of that. And yeah, so how people can contact me is that on Instagram and Facebook, I've made a new page called Hridayraj Counselling and Career Coaching, and that's basically how people can connect with me. And again, I'm also available on LinkedIn if people want to follow my journey, because that has a lot of the information. So yeah, if that's how people can get in touch and kind of keep a track of what's going on with me.
That's awesome. So, as we reach the end of the episode, is there any message that you would like to leave with our listeners, about creating a more inclusive and empathetic society?
So first of all, there should be a clear, open communication. Like if people actually listen to each other and actually focus on what is being communicated and what can help make the situation better, I think that is a big step forward. Apart from that, I don't have anything else to say. Thank you for this opportunity.
Right. So, with this, that's a wrap for our first episode. Thank you, Hridayraj, for taking out the time to speak to us. It really means a lot. And for our viewers, if you like this episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our social media channels down below. Do let us know in the comments what you'd like to see more of going forward. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.